Now, there was a report released by FIFA, that's football's governing body, that stated that 1 in 5 women footballers playing the Women's World Cup this year faced abuse on social media. That's a very stark statistic. It's a disturbing number. What this number says is that women footballers are 29% more likely to face abuse online than their male counterparts who participated in the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not a feminist rant. So hold on and just hear me out. I will just show you some facts, incidents, true events that only reiterate this finding. We're talking of the Women's World Cup. Now, what comes to your mind when I say that? Well, ideally, it should be Spain lifting the World Cup for the very first time. But you will picture this that's on your screens. Spain's now former football chief, Luis Rubiales, forcing a kiss on one of the Spanish players after the win, Jenni Hermoso. A kiss that was non-consensual and definitely not welcome. Now, that tells you the story. And Rubiales continues to be in the headlines even as he's fighting the court. Seems like he tried to do the same with an English footballer that very night. That piece of news came out just a few days ago, but let's shift focus from this sport to another and talk about something more recent. Take badminton and Japan's Nozomi Okuhara's experience. Now, just a bit about Nozomi. She's been world number 1, is a world champion and an Olympic medalist. In India, she would be an elite athlete. She's gone on social media to talk about her experience to get to her room and what that entailed. From the airport in Delhi, where she landed, to Cuttack, and then to her hotel. Now, let me tell you, it was not pretty. The only bright spark, she says, is her Indian friends in Sindhu and Prannoy helping her out. Imagine that Nozomi who had won the Super 300 in Lucknow and returned to India a week later to take part in the Odisha Super 100. She's on trying to get as many points as she can in her race to qualify for the Paris Olympics. Now, Okuhara says her troubles started at Delhi. Now, I had bad memories at Indian airports, she says, in the past. When I got out of the airport, a stranger started putting my luggage onto the cart without permission. I got scared and stopped, but he said something along the lines of, "I'll take it to the entrance." Feeling uneasy, I continued to the entrance. Now, all this while, what has happened is that her Uber driver that she had booked failed to arrive. She was not able to reach the Badminton Association. Multiple calls were getting no responses. She had to take a taxi to the hotel where she was going to stay a night before heading to Cuttack the next day. The cabbie she finally was forced to take because her Uber was incommunicado charged her a bomb because she compared that to the Uber fares. She ended up paying 10 times more than what she ideally would have. Now, I know what many of you are thinking. This is familiar, being fleeced by cabbies, but this was a horrific experience for the Japanese shuttler. And her ordeal did not end there. She faced the same struggles in Cuttack. She had arranged for transportation, but there was no one to come to pick her up at the airport. Upon reaching the hotel, she waited for 4 hours. That's right, 4 hours to get a room because there was apparently none available. She obviously contacted the association, and one of the officials who came out from the hotel, the Indian Association, to address her concerns, asked her for a selfie instead. Meanwhile, Sindhu was trying to get her accommodation elsewhere. The Japanese Badminton Federation then linked up with the Indian Association, and only then she managed to check in. She did say that the hotel staff were kind and helpful, but it was nothing short of a trying, harrowing experience. Now, all of this is so familiar to a lot of us. So these instances just reiterate how it isn't easy being women athletes the world over. There is some amount of resistance and struggles that one always has to face, whether it is in trying to check into a hotel from the airport or worse, facing abuse from utter strangers.
You only have to see scores of women across the internet or in the business, whether you're a presenter, you're a coach, you're a player, to realise that we're routinely used to dealing with systemic misogyny, bullying and behaviour that has been pretty normal for a large part of the football public. But I feel that sport is probably the last place in society where that male privilege exists, and that if you haven't experienced systemic misogyny like lots of us have, you can't for one moment understand how detrimental some of these conversations are, knowing that anything anyone says just enables an absolute pile-on, particularly on social media, which, let me be clear, it doesn't take a lot for people to pile on women.
Now, this is not a very surprising summation and makes me ask, does sports and by that extension the fraternity make it more difficult for women in sports? Is a level playing field a little too much to ask? Like when the women's WTA event organized in Mexico was done so shabbily that the world #1 had to question the organizers on the lack of infrastructure and safety for top women tennis players in the world. Now, I ask this especially when we come across comments like the one Joey Barton made. Now, for those who don't know, Joey Barton is a footballer, a former footballer, a controversial one who has been part of clubs like Manchester City, Newcastle United, went on to be a manager for Bristol Rovers. Not a very impressive resume that, yet he went on to say this on his social media platform. He says, and I quote, "I'm bothered about the female footballers who aren't good enough players to comment on the male players because they don't understand the game. Women shouldn't be talking with any kind of authority in the men's game." Come on, let's be serious. It's a completely different game. The women's game is thriving, fantastic to see. I cannot take a thing they say serious in the men's arena. Now, why so much hate, Barton? Now, we started the story with the FIFA report and we shall end with it too. While submitting the report, the FIFA scanned over 5 million posts and comments and verified over 7,000 instances of abuse or threatening behavior. As far as who were making these threatening comments, 67% of abusive accounts were traced back to North and Central America, while 21% was coming from Europe. And that's a lot of hatred for something that doesn't seem to have a strong purpose. And what will it take to even the scales? Now, Kobe Bryant, when accepting his Oscar for the short animation film Dear Basketball, had used the words someone had thrown at him: shut up and dribble. Well, all women athletes really want to do is shut up and play. That's all. That shouldn't be difficult.